Hi, welcome to Wandering into the Woods, a podcast brought to you by the creators of Adventures with BG. I'm Linda,
And this is Jarrett.
and today we'll be talking to you about day 3 of our Salkantay adventure.
So for day 3, we start at Collpapampa or Collpapampa or one of the other names that they have listed on the website. We're not really sure what exactly it is, but any of those will get you there. And you travel down to La Playa. I guess it's named because there's beaches, but it's on a river. So that's kind of how it has the name. As far as your trek goes, it's all downhill. You start at 9,842 feet or 3,000 meters, and you walk to the low point of La Playa at 2,000 meters or 6,716 feet. So by the standards of your trip, pretty low. But for people like us from Texas, that's still pretty high.
Yeah, you end up doing 9.7 miles.
Yeah, so 9.7 miles is what the day is, or it is 15.6 kilometers. The total trek is about 7 hours that day. They leave extra time so you can take a further adventure or destination trip to hot springs there. So the hot springs are called Hot Springs of Cocalmayo. The temperatures range from 40 degrees Celsius or 100 degrees Fahrenheit to 44 or 111-ish degrees Fahrenheit. So it's a really cool place. If you decide to do that, you take a short bus trip or van trip over, kind of like taxi style, and you can spend a couple of hours there.
And keep in mind, Jared and I visited during the dry season. So, I think what I figured out or picked up on this trip, Jared, is that Peru doesn't, they don't have winter versus summer. It seems to be more wet season versus dry season. And at least in this area, you could see, it was quote unquote winter for Peru.
Mhm.
It was their dry season. But being in La Playa, it did not feel like winter, right?
Yeah.
Not to me.
Yeah, I mean, it was still slightly chilly. It wasn't like Texas summer hot, but
Right. But even the water themselves, it didn't feel that hot. I didn't realize we were in springs that were supposed to be about 100 degrees.
yeah.
So that was interesting. But I mean, the climate was very enjoyable, agreeable.
Okay. And then also your route takes you next to the Usumayo River. So that's where you start. That spring or stream that we've talked about in the last episodes actually starts turning into a river now. Llama Path says the scenery isn't quite as stunning as the next day. I tend to disagree. While you don't have big mountain views, there's a bunch of just random waterfalls, and the stream /
Right.
river is beautiful as it's, flowing next to you, and sometimes you're above it. Sometimes you get down, next to it and you're parallel, and sometimes you get to cross over it with bridges. So it's a different experience, and I would not say that the scenes are not as stunning, but it's definitely different. So it goes from epic views to epic plants and rainforests and waterfalls and stuff. And you also along the way, there are a bunch of different, plantations or, small local farms where they grow things like grenadine, coffee, avocado, and things like that. So there is the option to taste it like in these small stores that are along the trail. They're
This
just like little huts.
this is the portion that's like we're on the outskirts of the Amazon, right?
I think it's all, I mean, the cloud forest, the rainforest, it's all part of.
Right,
It
but this
just,
definitely felt like
yeah, no, we're out of the cloud forest and down into more of a traditional rainforest on this
yeah.
part of the trek.
And you definitely feel that way on day 3.
Hmm. And so that's kind of it for the basics of the trip.
So this morning, to take off for this trip, we had to, we started by saying goodbye to our porters after packing up. This is the last day or leg of the trip that the porters were as involved helping us set up as far as our campsites, etc. Llama Path does have staff that help you do that
Yeah.
for the extra night, but they get to travel via van. They don't have to.
Yeah, they don't have to walk anymore.
Right.
Because this town and the next town are connected by roads, so they don't have to
Right.
actually do the walk and run the horses. So your
Right.
horse folks head back on their own. They go back to their own town, they walk back.
Exactly.
And your porters, they actually just get in a van or truck or whatever it may be, and they drive your stuff the rest of the way to La Playa.
Right.
And so this, I believe, is where we put all of our money together and tip them as well.
The part of the staff, right? The horse staff. Yeah.
The staff and the porters, I think
Yeah.
we tipped them that day.
Okay. And then, so after taking some pictures with some of the staff we were saying goodbye to that day, we head out on the road, and
We also had
I mean
breakfast.
the hiking, yeah, a warm breakfast, which was really nice as usual. Like,
Yeah,
and you get spoiled rotten
you do. It's
on the
good food.
path. It's all, every meal is great. And then, so we're out on the road, and Jarrett was asking me what I remember. What I remember most about day 3 was looking down at the river a lot
Yeah.
and seeing it grow from a stream to a full blown river. And that's what I remember the most. I think I was more focused on making sure I didn't trip over rocks, etc. Was this the day that we had like that long, like narrow path by the slippery rocks?
I mean, there was sections like that, but overall, this was one of the much easier days, I think,
Okay.
because you're going downhill. It's less steep than the other days, as
Hmm.
far as decline goes, and a lot of the trails a little bit wider and more traveled. But there was that section where it was kind of washed out,
Yeah.
and the trail was narrow, so that did happen.
And I think that's what it was, because this is clearly an area that gets a lot of rain
Yeah,
and water, and it seemed like some big section had been washed off. And anyway, so yeah, but I remember it was beautiful most of the time. It was like great. It was just I don't know, it was all amazing. I can't recall any more specifics than that than looking at our pictures, and yeah, it seems like that's the pictures Jarrett captured
yeah,
were very
and
faithful.
and so, but yeah, the trail. So it's a continuation, of the cloud forest, and then you slowly move down into a more traditional rainforest. So that just really means slightly more vegetation, and you're not up as high, and you probably get more rain. We
Hmm.
started next to narrow stream, and it grows bigger. So some of the big stuff here is that you cross the stream quite a few times. There's various bridges. Some are bigger than others. Some are pretty cool. Some are pretty sketchy. And as you go down, it gets less rocky, and you move away from the river as it gets bigger. As you get, much further down, you actually start seeing things that look like dedicated farms and plots
Hmm.
with stuff growing. So when you first start out, you may see someone growing something up on the side, but it's pretty steep. So it's, more just random things are up there, and they harvest from it, and then they spend more time farming and things. Also, along the way, there was a pretty large waterfall. And so we did the obligatory thing where our tour guide got together and took pictures on some rocks. It was actually kind of a pain getting everyone together to do it. I remember Linda being like one of the only people who slipped and got her foot wet.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, getting into position. I think it's
Right.
because she was like pushing and trying quickly to get into position and get out of the way is why you slipped
Yeah.
instead of just being patient.
Yeah, and it wasn't a big. I had good shoes, so it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, so that was one of the cool things, stopping by this waterfall. Also, getting some pictures on the bridge. There's a couple of sections like that Linda mentioned that receive their fair share of rain and probably don't have enough vegetation. So the trail gets washed out and can be narrow in spots.
I remember that particular instance. I recall. I remember very specifically telling myself, "Don't look down, don't look down, don't look down,"
Yeah,
and I didn't even realize you were taking pictures of me at that point.
yeah. And then I guess that kind of goes without saying, those sections are going to be the dustiest by far.
Mm-hmm.
And then so you'll continue down. Things will definitely start leveling out as you get close to La Playa.
Right.
Once we were there, it's actually kind of like a small town. You kind of walk in a street, and there's stores and shops aligned on both spots. This was one of the first times at our campsite. It's loosely called a campsite because it's like a backyard that overlooks the river and half the
Right.
city. So it's not really what I would consider, a campsite, but it's a plot of grass. It's also the first time we really had to worry about mosquitoes.
Mm-hmm.
There was some kid out there, I don't know if you remember him, with his unicycle. It was like a
No.
all-trail unicycle, and like I think he was complaining to some of our group members that the mosquitoes had just bit him up real bad.
Ugh. Awful.
Yeah, we were also lucky enough that in our little area was a small store attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were also a coffee shop. So we did have coffee before we went out to
Yeah.
the
La
hot
Playa.
springs.
Sorry. Yeah, we were at La Playa to the hot springs.
Yeah.
Um.
So we had dinner. Everything was set up. We did the normal thing where they give us some hot water and some tea, and then we hung out, and people got some snacks if they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And Linda and I had coffee. That was one thing that our group thought was weird that, as we drink coffee all the time, but I think it's fairly American. But some of them, French Canadian, British, and then our guide was Peruvian. So, they weren't used to Americans drinking coffee at all hours because we drank it, with almost every meal.
Right.
And they thought we were weird for it, but,
that's our version of tea.
Yeah. So then after dinner, our guide, Roger, was like, okay, who wants to go to the hot springs? Everyone went but the French Canadian couple. You go in, you pay the guide, a handful of money. I forget how much it was a person, but it included the tickets.
Right.
And the taxi ride. I looked up the tickets. So for foreigners, it's $10. For Peruvian nationals, it's $5. And for local nationals, it's $2.50. So if you live in the town or whatever the Peruvian county equivalent, I'm sure that's what your locals are for.
Yeah, and they recommend that you not take very much. You can rent lockers there for we didn't rent lockers, so I don't know how much.
Yeah, I don't know.
And but I would recommend it if you can bear that expense. If you want to take any towels, or like any small bottles of shampoo or soap. And the reason I say that is because that's another chance you might have in 1 or 2 days of bathing and showering, and that's what we ended up doing. And
we didn't have any issue with leaving our towels out.
Right,
we took like a bag or something, right?
Yeah, and we thought we were going to be okay, not actually showering, but once I was there, I felt like, and so one of our group mates was kind enough to give me some shampoo. But yeah, that's what I'm recommending. Like, if you feel like you're going to need to wash up afterward, just pay for the locker and take your little things with you.
But going back to the springs, so it's well kept. They maintain the changing rooms, the bathrooms. They're clean, even as many as people were going through. Wet floors, obviously, because there's only so much you can do.
Right.
They have security that walks through, so they keep them from stealing stuff or anyone getting rowdy.
Right.
Don't worry if you don't have a bathing suit or something you want to swim in, because there are shops all around the outside of this. So you can run over and buy some annoying pool floaty if you wanted to, or at least something to swim in. So once you go in, you've got like your changing rooms to the right.
They also have like a food and
Yeah, I'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I'll work through like our visit.
Okay, go.
So then, you go in, everything's to the right. There's like benches and stuff where you can set your stuff. That's what we did. And then as a group, we went down. There's like 3 hot water pools and 1 cool water. They have various different temperatures. There were signs out that kind of told you what they were. They were hot, but to me, it wasn't quite like American hot tub hot.
Right,
or
I
if you've
agree.
ever been to a hot tub. But it was still hot and it felt great. So we spent, I don't know, an hour or so together as a group.
Felt like it, yeah.
Just trying out all the different pools, see which one was the hottest. If you're there, you'll see people grouping up in the corner. That'll be them like group bullying people out of the way because that's where the hot water comes from. So it'll be the hottest spot in the pool. So if you're lucky enough to grab one of those spots, definitely do it because you'll get the hottest water. Then after, we all bummed around in the water and, it felt amazing because, you're tired from hiking. At the very end where the pools drain out, I think it's down into like the cold pool area, which no one was in. There is like a waterfall, but that's where you're allowed to take showers.
Yeah.
So if you have your stuff, you can take a shower there. They're cool with soap and water. This was my first shower, but I just used the water and it was good enough. A lot of other people were like, oh, soap and shampoo and really like showered it up down in there.
Those of us with hair.
Yeah. Then after that, we went to the food stand that Linda mentioned. They have food, it's tourist priced, but they also have beers and cocktails.
I think since we had dinner, all we ended up having was some. Did we just have some beers with our
beers or cocktails? I don't remember.
Something like that.
It was me, you, and one of the other girls came over.
Yeah.
And we all talked for a little bit. After that, it started to like rain a little bit.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Which is weird because it was the dry season, but it's a rainforest. So.
Yeah, so it happens. So it started to rain and everyone like hustled out. And that's kind of when we left. I don't know if it was because of the rain or if something else.
I don't know either. I don't remember.
Yeah, and I don't know the actual hours, but from what I saw, it's open from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. So I think it could be a very cool place to visit, at nighttime if you can schedule that in.
Right.
So it's only 4 kilometers from Santa Teresa, the town, which is a fairly big city. So if you're in that area and you can make it over, it's much better hot springs than Aguascalientes. They're just warmer water, not like quality wise, but the water's hotter.
Right.
It's a little further away, so it's not quite as busy and touristy. There's also locals, so if you're trying to mix it in and meet new people, it's a better location like that. But I think it could be a cool opportunity to check it out at night or even early in the morning, just a low sun, sunset, sunrise, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Could really turn it into like an idealistic trip. It's also set in a valley like everything else because, steep sides there. So that's a very cool aspect of it as well. Overall, it's just well kept. I highly recommend it if you're on this trek to find a way to get over there and kind of relax and, treat your body nice.
Treat yourself.
And then after that, we got back in the van. You're on, winding mountain roads. They drive kind of crazy there, but that's how they do it.
Oh,
so
yeah.
there and back. And before you know it, you're back at your campsite in the town of La Playa. And then we ran into some issues that night, which kept us from sleeping.
It might have just been poor timing on our part. Because keep in mind, at this point, you are in a town. And we happened to be there during a major... Like we were there during close to the Peruvian is it the Peruvian New Year? What was it? The national celebration?
Yeah,
but they also have their class celebrations as well and reunions. And so that night that we were there, they happened to have a huge reunion, and
it was a raging school party,
right? And we could hear it like blocks away,
lights.
and see the lights, and it was noisy, and so we didn't sleep that well that night.
Yeah,
because they can party hard for a long time, and. All the power to them. And so, but we couldn't get a lot of rest that night.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, our little grass plot overlooks the river. And on the other side of that was the school. So there was zero things between us. So,
right. No filter.
Yeah. So it just came right at us. I mean, I slept through most of it. A couple times it kept me awake, but I know a lot of other people had some significant issues.
Yeah. Some of us just can't fall asleep as easy. I mean, I should be used to it growing up in a Hispanic household, but I'm not.
Yeah. All the weekend parties, it was just like that.
Yeah, I know. But so it wasn't a great night's rest, and I needless to say, I was pretty grumpy the next morning. But we'll talk about that, in the next episode. Well, that wraps up day 3 of our Salkantay trek. We hope you've enjoyed listening to this podcast regarding that trip, and we hope that you will stay tuned to listen about what happens in episode/day 4.
As always, if you like the podcast, don't forget to subscribe or follow it in your favorite app. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, if you could go ahead and leave us a 5-star review, that'd really help us out in getting new listeners. That's all for today, guys. Make sure you have fun, stay hydrated, and stay safe as you're wandering into the woods.